The desert sun bled a final searing orange across the sky, painting the mesas in shades of rust and shadow. In the hollow, where an old river once carved its scar, the wind whispered dry and restless, a forgotten ballad of dust and despair. It was the only sound for miles save for the creak of a saddle and the soft footfalls of a horse descending a slope. A man rode a ghost in a worn duster, a Winchester rifle, a familiar weight in his calloused hands. This was Grady Holt, a man who had gone quiet in a world that had stolen his words and his peace. He saw her from the high ridge, a lone figure in the basin below, kneeling in the white alkali dust. Her back was straight, a defiance in the face of desolation. Her dress, a patched and tattered thing, clung to her, the left sleeve torn away to reveal a slender shoulder. Long black hair matted with dust and sweat clung to her face. As he drew closer, the details came into sharp focus: a raw line across one cheek, the faint bruising near an eye, the exposed curve of a collarbone. There was no terror in her dark eyes as they met his, just a profound, bone-deep resignation. "Don't shoot, Cowboy." Her voice was a low whisper, raspy from thirst yet steady as a rock. "Let me live, and I'll give you a family." Grady reined his horse to a halt, the dust settling around her bare feet. He looked at her, then scanned the empty, unforgiving land behind her. A trap, a plea. He saw no fear in her gaze, only the hollow calm of someone who had long since stopped expecting salvation. Slowly, his fingers unwound from the rifle's lever. He dismounted, the groan of his knees, a testament to the miles he'd ridden. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice a gravelly murmur. She didn't answer. He waited, the silence between them thick with unasked questions. He had been a scout during the war, a man who buried his wife Ellen and their infant son Jonas 6 years ago to a fever that had no mercy. Since then, he had built a life of solitude, a monument of quiet grief. He wasn't looking to save anyone. He wasn't looking for anything at all. But in her stillness, in the way she met his gaze with no flinching, he saw something that resonated with his own desolate heart. He gave her a canteen of water, watching as she drank it in one long, desperate swallow. Then he handed her a strip of dried bread. She ate slowly, deliberately, as if tasting something she had forgotten. "You run from someone?" he asked. She gave a slow nod. "Your tribe think you betrayed them?" Another nod. "You did." A pause. "No," she said, her voice barely audible. "But they believe it." He didn't press. He led her to his horse, a ghost white stallion named Ghost, and with a careful hand he helped her into the saddle. She was hot to the touch, her body trembling with fever and exhaustion. The weight of her against him was a sudden foreign presence he hadn't felt in a lifetime. He mounted behind her, the raw heat of her skin against his, a startling contrast to the cold emptiness he had come to accept. As they rode toward his homestead, a 2-room house huddled near a half-dug well, he felt a flicker of something he had long buried: hope, and with it the quiet, dangerous stirrings of a forbidden future. The small ranch house was a testament to his solitude. A single table, a cot, a stove, and a bucket of stale water. No decorations, no mirrors, no softness. She stepped inside without comment, her eyes moving over the sparseness, as if she expected nothing more. He pointed to a chair. "Sit." She did slowly, her eyes on him, cautious but not afraid. He gave her more water, watching her measure him, with a gaze that saw past the rifle and the rough clothes. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maria." "Grady," he replied. That first night, she didn't speak much. She washed in the cold water from the bucket behind the house, her hands shaking slightly as she splashed it over her bruised and raw skin. Grady stayed inside, his back to the door, but his ears tuned to every soft gasp, every quiet movement. When she returned, she was wrapped in the blanket he'd given her, her wet hair hanging down her back. The air around her smelled of wind and earth, no longer of death and despair. He laid out a folded wool blanket and a thin mattress near the fireplace, and she lay down without a word, her body coiled like a wary animal. He sat by the window, his rifle upright, his routine of quiet vigilance now disrupted by the soft, ragged rhythm of her breathing. He knew she wasn't sleeping, but waiting, just like him. In the morning, before the sun crested the ridge, he found her sitting cross-legged by the hearth watching him. "There's coffee," he said. She took the mug from his hand, the brief brush of their fingers, an electric shock that he felt down to his bones. He saw her now younger than he had first guessed, perhaps not yet 25. Her features had sharpened a faint scar visible across her jaw. "Why were you really out there alone?" he asked. She set the mug down. "My brother led a raid on white settlers. Someone warned the ranchers. They blamed me." "Did you?" "Number A man, a traitor, talked to me by the river. He thought I owed him something. I said no. He must have told the other something else. They tied me outside the camp. No food, no water. Said I brought shame." "Why say that thing?" he asked, his voice low. "About a family." She looked up at him, her dark eyes unblinking. "Because if I begged you might have turned away. Men look at me like something to buy. But if I gave you something you would listen." His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. He stood moving to the fire to break eggs, the words of her plain truth hanging in the air. She didn't see him as a rescuer, but as another man who might take what he wanted. The hiss of the eggs in the skillet was a punctuation to the silence. He didn't deny it, he just cooked. A quiet rhythm began to form between them. She helped him gather water, mended his torn shirts, and even started cleaning the stove. She was cautious, precise, her movements economical. He noticed the way she moved, her bare feet tucked under her. The constant, subtle tug of her dress, revealing the curve of her collarbone. It wasn't about hunger, it was about presence. She was real, moving alive in a house that had been a tomb. That night she asked to sleep in the barn. He didn't argue, just brought her a blanket and a lantern. He watched her from the doorway, her shadow long and distorted against the stall wall. He understood her need for space, for a boundary. He thought of Ellen and Jonah, of the two headstones behind the house, of the way grief had folded into everything. But now someone else was breathing under his roof. She wasn't a stranger anymore. She was just there. The wind that came with the dawn was dry and restless, stirring the dust and slapping the clothesline. Grady found her on the porch, wrapped in her blanket, her wet hair combed through with her fingers. She was stitching another of his shirts, her hands moving with a practiced grace. He offered her coffee, their fingers brushing again. "You slept?" he said. "There was no thunder," she replied. He didn't ask what she meant, but he understood. They worked together that morning, clearing brush and hauling wood. She never asked for help, but she accepted it when he offered. There was a growing comfort between them, not yet trust, but a mutual understanding. Later they ate on the porch. The silence was not empty, but functional, a space where unspoken thoughts could move. "When was the last time someone touched you?" she asked, her voice a calm whisper. He looked straight ahead. "Before my boy got sick. 6 years. You touch me careful," she said. He met her eyes. "You don't flinch now." That evening, as the stars began to pinprick the sky, she spoke again. "You look at me when I'm not looking." He didn't deny it. "You think I'm trying to trap you?" he asked, his voice low. "No," she said. "Then why don't you come closer?" He looked at her, his jaw tight. "Because you're still healing. So are you." The quiet was heavy. Then, without a word, she stood and walked toward him, her bare feet brushing the edge of his boot. Her hand reached out, not boldly but steady, and rested on his knee. He swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on her face. Slowly, his own hand rose uncertain and rested on her wrist. The contact was louder than any conversation. She stepped closer, their knees touching. "I want you to kiss me," she whispered. He hesitated, the moment, a fragile thing that could shatter. "I'm not a man who does things halfway," he said. "I'm not asking for halfway." He leaned in, and their lips met. It was not a kiss of hunger, but of slow, searching reverence. His hand cupped her jaw, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. Her fingers curled into his shirt. She leaned into him, warm and certain. They didn't speak. She stayed beside him, her head against his shoulder. Her presence, a weight he had forgotten he needed. A man who had buried everything and a woman who had lost everything sat close, alive, not alone. For the first time in 6 years, Grady Holt did not feel the ache of a past he couldn't change. He felt the promise of a future he had never planned. The hooves did not fade. They grew steadier, echoing off the rocks. Grady stepped onto the porch as the last light slipped behind the hills, his rifle a familiar weight. Behind him the door creaked. Maria stood there barefoot, her hands wrapped around her middle. She didn't speak, but her body was stiff with readiness. "How many men would come for you?" he asked, his voice low. "Maybe 3, maybe 5. Depends who sent them." "Would they be white?" She hesitated. "One was." He handed her a small pistol, his old Colt. You know how to use it? She checked the chamber with a practiced flick of her wrist. Grady didn't need more proof. The first figure broke from the trees. A man on horseback, scruffy and older, a long rifle resting on his saddle. He had a long scar down the left side of his face. His name was Clive Remick. You lost. Grady's voice cut through the stillness. Name's Clive Remick. I'm tracking someone. Apache girl bounty on her head. Maria stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. She didn't kill anyone. Remick's eyes flickered to her. Well, now you're either brave or foolish, miss. Grady's voice was a low growl. She's on my land. That makes her my concern. You really want to die for an Apache woman? Remick scoffed. She ain't a bounty, Grady said, his eyes hard and steady. She's a person. You touch her. Remick's hand drifted to his belt. Is that what this is, a touch? I said. Grady's voice was a whisper of cold steel. She's not yours. A shot rang out, hitting the post near Grady's feet. In an instant, Grady raised his rifle and fired the shot, dropping the man on the left from his saddle. The others scattered. The yard fell silent save for the shallow breaths of the animals. Then Remick's voice came from the trees. You made your choice, Holt. This ain't over. He and the remaining men retreated, their shadows shrinking in the growing dark. When the sound of hooves was gone, Grady lowered his rifle and turned to Maria. You all right? She nodded, her hand still shaking on the pistol. You'd fight for me. I already am. She stepped closer, laying her hand on his chest. If there's a chance I don't get to stay, I want to give something now. She wasn't seducing him. She was offering herself with a profound clarity on her own terms. He led her inside the door, shutting behind them. He undid the buttons of her dress, slowly, one by one. Her skin was warm, her breath soft against his collarbone. She undid his shirt with careful fingers. They moved together on the bed, quiet, steady, with no urgency. His hands moved over her body with a reverence he hadn't felt in a lifetime. She pulled him close, her lips parted, her eyes open, and in the silence they found a language that needed no words. Did you ever think you'd touch someone again? She asked later as she lay against him. No, he whispered. Me either. They slept, but both knew the quiet wouldn't last. The morning would bring the men who didn't believe in peace. The silence of the morning was heavy. Grady rose carefully and stepped outside. He saw the tracks in the dust, 5 sets fresh from the north. They were here, close, waiting. He went back inside. Maria was pulling her dress over her shoulders. Her face was calm, focused. They're here, he said. She nodded. He showed her the blind spot near the fence line. She walked the perimeter with him, her steps no longer limping but confident. As they passed the barn, she stopped. If something happens, don't let them bury me. Nameless, not like your wife. His throat tightened. I don't want to think that far ahead. You have to. That's what we're taught. Your name, he asked, his voice thick. Maria. Ellen carved the stone. My son never got one. His name was Jonah. If I die, she said softly, touching his jaw, say my name once, then forget the pain. He didn't answer. He just pulled her into him, holding her for a long minute. By mid-morning, Remick appeared with 3 other men. They stopped just outside the yard, their rifles visible. Told you I'd be back. Remick grinned. You brought help, Grady replied, his shotgun slung low. Halt. That woman ain't yours. She's wanted. Let her go, and we ride out clean. Maria stepped out beside him, pistol in her hand. She's with me, Grady said, and she ain't going anywhere. She ain't a bounty. Remick mocked, his voice sharp. You touched her. Grady didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Remick's. Then a shot rang out, and the yard erupted in a symphony of chaos. Grady dropped one man. Maria's shot forced another back behind a stump. Remick ducked and crawled for cover. You made your choice, Holt, Remick's voice screamed from the trees. This ain't over. They retreated. The dust settled. Grady lowered his rifle and took Maria's hand, his fingers steadying hers. It's done for now, he said. We need to bury him, she said, her voice a calm whisper. They did, just past the fence line, a nameless grave in the dry earth. That night they sat on the porch, his hand holding hers. You still want to stay, he asked. This is the first place I ever fought to keep, she said. He looked out over the dark horizon. You're not going to have to fight alone anymore. And in that moment, a truth settled between them, unspoken but understood. They had already become a family, not from blood but from choice. The days passed without gunfire, a quiet that was both a blessing and a tension. They stayed close to the house. Grady scanned the ridge. Maria kept the pistol beneath her pillow. Her garden began to sprout small green shoots rising through the dry soil. One afternoon she stood in the doorway, a freshly mended shirt in her hands. "You keep every shirt, even when it's useless," she said. "I don't throw away things that still carry purpose." That night she came to his bed without a word. She slipped beneath the blanket rested against his chest, and then her hand found his and placed it over her stomach. "I think I'm pregnant," she whispered. Grady froze. The weight of her words settled on him, not with fear, but with a profound and heavy sense of purpose. He slowly moved his hand, his fingers pressing softly. "You sure?" "Number, but I felt it. Something's different, and it's not from fear." He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, "All right," he said. Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't have to stay." "I already stayed," he said. "You lost a child once. I remember every hour of it, so this is mine too." "Hours," she whispered. She buried her face into his chest, and his arm came around her slow and solid. They lay like that the rest of the night. The next morning, Grady went outside and looked toward the ridge. The world was still rough and dangerous, but he didn't feel the pull of it anymore. Everything he needed was inside those four walls. When he came back and Maria was at the stove, her hands stirring a pan. Her hair was tied back, her body wrapped in a shawl. "Marry me," he said. She froze. "Grady, I don't need a church, just your word. Say you'll stay." She looked up into his eyes, a faint smile on her face. "You already know the answer. Say it anyway." "I'll stay," she said, "and I'll raise this child here with you." He kissed her, then rested his forehead against hers. "We'll give this baby a name. No more unnamed graves." She closed her eyes, and for the first time, she cried not from fear but because she believed him. For the first time in her life, she believed in staying. Late spring, a baby came. The air was thick with the scent of wild flowers. The garden thick with green shoots climbed the fence. Life had continued without grand events, just quiet, predictable days. Maria's belly had grown round her walk slow, her hand, often resting on her back. Grady kept close, watching the trails, fixing what needed fixing. The labor was long, hard, and quiet. No midwife. Just him and her. He held her hand, wiped the sweat from her brow. She didn't scream but bit down on a strip of cloth. When it was over and the child's first small sharp cry filled the house, Grady stood frozen for a beat, staring. He cut the cord, wrapped the child in a soft old shirt, and laid her on Maria's chest. "It's a girl. I didn't think I'd live this long," she whispered, looking down at the tiny, warm body. "Neither did I." They named her Elena. A name with weight, one that could be spoken aloud, one that wouldn't be hidden on an unnamed stone. 3 days later, Grady took a hammer and carved her name on a plank of pine for the front gate. The whole family ranch. Remick never came back. Grady no longer checked the ridge each morning. Maria no longer kept the pistol by her pillow. They built a cradle together, and it sat beside their bed, rocking smooth. Elena slept easy there, her fingers curled around her mother's hair or Grady's thumb. Some evenings they sat on the porch, Maria's head against his shoulder, the baby asleep on her chest. The same wind that had once carried fear now brought nothing but the scent of the coming rain. "You never told me why you stopped living after they died," she said quietly. He looked out at the horizon. "Because everything felt like pretending after that. Even breathing." He turned to her. "And now it feels like starting again." She shifted Elena in her arms. "I used to think love was something you had to prove, beg for, survive for." "And now," he asked. "Now I think it's something you stay for. Even when it's quiet, even when it's hard." He took her hand gently. "You staying?" She smiled, a quiet, certain peace in her eyes. "I'm already home." And so what began in a dry riverbed under the threat of death became something else entirely. Grady Holt, a man who lived for the past, found a future in the woman who had nothing left. And Maria, cast out, hunted, forgotten, gave life, not just to a child, but to a home, a man, a name. There was no more running, no more hiding, just a family. And that in the end was enough.